Welcome to our third video in a full series of 52, and today's topic is verbs and how to identify them. Well, we can say that a verb is a word that describes an action, an occurrence or happening, and a state of being. We usually call verbs the doing words. And it's important to know that a sentence cannot exist without a verb. A sentence cannot exist without a verb. Verb, usually the doing word. Now, when we look for the verb in the sentence, we can look for several things. The first thing we can look is for words that describe action, right? Action verbs. For example, Joseph practices athletics every day. Practice in the sentence, or practices rather, is our action. This is what Joseph is doing every day. The subject is Joseph. So practices is an action word. It's an action verb. The cat sat on the mat. Now we know that the cat is not sitting on the mat anymore because this verb is in the past tense. We will talk about that a little bit later. But again, sitting, the cat sits on the mat, for example. Sits, sat, will sit. Those are all action words. Every day at noon, Caleb eats his lunch. Caleb here seen eating, enjoying his lunch. Eating is an action. It's a word that describes an action. So easy to find the verbs if they look like this. But a verb can also describe a state of being. For example, Sue is a student. Is her state of being. Is in the sentence is therefore our verb because it describes a state of being, and we can see there is no action in the sentence. Here is another one. Eating her ice cream, of course, eating is a verb, but Wendy seems happy. Seems here is again the state of being, so this is our verb. Eating will be the verb, and seems will be the state of being verb. We can also look for auxiliary verbs. Auxiliary verbs are verbs that help to say more or to provide more information about the verb. Peter realized that he must study regularly to pass the exam. Must study, must is our auxiliary verb. Study is, of course, the verb because it describes an action. Then we also get what is called modal verbs, things that we can do. For example, we are able to drink beer, but we may not drink beer in certain places. So the words can or may not, these are modal verbs, and modal verbs are a type of auxiliary verb used to express things such as ability, can, permission, may, possibility, could. A modal verb typically will use words such as can, may, must, will, and ought to. We can drink beer, but we ought to drink beer at lunchtime, or ought we not to drink beer at lunchtime. May not drink beer in the classroom, that is a modal verb. Ought not to drink beer at breakfast. Again, another example of modal verbs. So can drink beer, certainly, but may not and ought not to are other examples of modal verbs. Then we need to know that a verb is a kind of a shape shifter. Verbs can shift their shape according to the tense, past tense, present tense, future tense, agreement with subject. I sit, he sits, they sit, and other things which we will get to in a different video. But it is important to know that there needs to be a verb tense agreement. The verb to be, for example, which, as you may remember, is a verb that describes a state of being. To be, yesterday was, today is, or depending on I am, he is or she is, and they are, and tomorrow will be. The verb go changes, went, go, or goes, and will go. The verb eat changes to at. That is one of the funny things about English, right? That some words change strangely when we go into the past tense or the future. Today is eat or eats, and tomorrow is will eat, and so on. We will get to this part of grammar, the verb tense agreement and the verb subject agreement, in different videos, but it is important that we know that there has to be an agreement between the verb and the tense, as well as the verb and the subject, because the verb is a shape shifter. It changes. So to summarize, how do we find the verb? Well, we look for those words that express action, happening, or states of being, and we follow through some tips. We look for action words, we identify state of being words, we look for helping or auxiliary verbs, we check for modal verbs, and we even check the sentence structure, because the verb usually follows the subject. Here is an example. Kim is always happy when he picks up the violin to play his favorite music, which he knows may help him land a spot in his choice university. We can find the auxiliary verb, so is always happy, so is happy. We can find the modal verb, may help. May help is a modal verb. And here are all the verbs in red. And I wonder if you can tell me how we can find them as verbs, or how we can identify them as verbs. If you can, or if you want to, put your answer in the comment section below. Thank you very much for watching, and you should, which is a modal verb, subscribe to my channel. This will, that's an auxiliary verb, help you to improve your English. Thank you for watching, and have a lovely day.